Geoff and Kira, having fun, back for more talk.
Yes.
And more fun and more riffing on everything 2018 and beyond.
Almost 2019. Fuck.
2019.
Have like another month.
Wow.
That's crazy, right?
New Year's is coming.
Yeah.
Wow. Time
do you
flies.
do New Year's resolutions at all?
You know, I used to do New Year's resolutions, but I haven't as much in recent years because I've read and heard about that a lot of times when people make a resolution, they make a resolution and then they don't hold by it.
Yeah.
So I tried not doing it for the last few years. However, the other argument for that is it is an affirmation of sorts. So if you're saying something that you want to happen, oftentimes if you're committed to that, that then displays itself in reality a while later. So I have mixed feelings on the New Year's resolution.
Yeah, I don't see me there. I don't feel like I need a first day, like the first of one particular random month, like a January, to tell me that like that's the new year. Like now I have to create my resolutions. I should be creating them every day.
You know, I like that. I like that you don't. What it is you don't want a set date when you have to do it.
Do it today. Do it tomorrow. You know, always be working on yourself. There's no reason why it needs to be Jan 1 and the start of a new year. Like, what's wrong with today?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's great.
So
always be open to making your own, to doing
exactly.
it when you want to do it. I agree. So, anyway, today we are going to discuss our main topic is attachment theory.
Yes.
There was a book written a while back about it, and it's really been talked about online in blogs and on various podcasts talk about it, and it's really a frame for what's going on in relationships and what's happened in relationships really forever. This has been going on, but there was this book written that kind of caused a renaissance in people's understanding of what's been labeled as push-pull when you're in relationships. And most people aren't really aware of it, and they should be aware of it because it really helps you understand how you connect to a significant other when you're dating. And I've certainly found it to be very at play in my life, and you actually, I see it in others too, and it can cross into friendships, it can cross into the work environment, into, obviously it's part of families, but what it believes is, to go into it a little more, the core of the theory is that your attachment style and the way you connect to a significant other is based around childhood, things that happened in your childhood. And they say that most of it happened before about the age of 2 or 3, right when you came into the world. And it gave you, when you did that, how you connected to your parents gave you a frame for how you connect to a loved one when you're dating, when you're in a relationship. And what they said in this book was that there's 3 attachment styles, and they are basically, you have the secure attachment, people who are comfortable in relationships and can connect to others. That's one. And then on the other side, you have insecure attachment, and the 2 within that are anxious types and avoidant types. So you have insecures, which are anxious or avoidant, and then you have secures. And about half the world, they think, these are studies, and keep in mind, these studies can be very disjointed. And you don't know who they're polling and such, but right now they're saying about half the world is secure and the other half is insecure, meaning they're either anxious or avoidant. So, in LA, it's probably 90% insecure in LA. So basically everybody out here is no. But if you read this book, Amir Levine, and it gives you a good framework, and there's tests you can take that give you a greater understanding of it. And I would highly recommend that you check this out, Google it. We're going to talk about it more here because it will give you a good framework for your relationships and which of these 3 attachment types you are.
And I think, you know, sometimes I'll read these books and I'm just like, I'll like be dozing off because it's so dry. And I get it, like I understand what they're saying, but when it's not put into like a real world context, I almost like it when like the authors are like, and this is who I was dating and this is what it was. And it's like a really good framework for, I'm like, oh, now I understand. So instead of like a textbook written, it has a little bit more of like an attachment to the author so that I can like understand what the fuck he's talking about.
Right.
You know what I mean?
When people make it more personal.
Yeah, for sure. Like, you know, talking about how they've approached, you know, attachment and avoidant and those types of people that they've dated or have been with in the past, you know?
I do. And I think that people, it's easy to get, people don't like labels. This gets very, you know, people are like, you're giving me a pathological label, you know, I don't want labels. You know, we don't live in a perfect world, you know. When they talk about these frames, it's really all very subjective and it's all a big spectrum. So when you're talking about them, know that there's a large openness. You can move around on the attachment spectrum. You can change, you can grow, you can get worse. All of it is just giving people a frame to better understand themselves. And I agree with what you're saying. When people talk about personal experiences in author, that gives you a lot better understanding of it because you can connect to it. I totally agree with that.
Like, what's your real world scenario that you've had to deal with when it comes to attachment? Because we all have had them, obviously. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about that. For me, I haven't had a lot of long relationships. All of mine have been months, not years. I've had my most recent ones. I had one a couple years ago where we were dating for 3 or 4 months and we ended up breaking it off. And then I had one really recently, which went 6 or 7 months, and we broke that off. But during both of these most recent ones, I learned about attachment during it. And I came to realize from taking tests and learning about that I was on the avoidant side of the spectrum.
Oh, interesting.
And avoidance, so to talk about avoidant attachment a little bit, because we've said what these labels are, but to talk about it a little bit, the avoidant types they tend to not be comfortable with intimacy, and they tend to run away from it. And the reason that happens is when the feelings of love and the feelings of intimacy start to manifest, they, based on their frame from childhood and even genetics, I think there's genetics into this too now, they read that kind of as like anxiety, like, you know, it's too much.
Back off,
Intimacy is too much. Back off.
It's like every boyfriend I've ever had. Just kidding.
I mean, that's how it goes, and this is gender new. I mean, the guy can be this way, or the girl can be this way, and vice versa. But if you want some avoidant, a good thing to look at to understand avoidance, we'll talk about them for now, is if you look at there's characters in movies.
Yeah.
All the insecure attachments are all the great movie characters. So like, it makes for the good.
Oh, interesting.
Insecures are kind of boring.
Right.
And like, it's not.
Right. Not much of a storyline with them.
When you watch The Bachelor.
Right.
All of those people.
Right.
Are insecure attachment. And then they throw in a couple of secures.
Oh my god, that's hilarious.
And they can kind of guide them. And I don't even know if the Bachelor producers or reality TV producers even are aware of attachment theory. I'm sure they are, but they are literally casting people.
That's so interesting. Are you able to watch anything anymore? Like, without being like, oh, that person is an avoidant, and that, you know what I mean? Like,
you can pick it up quickly. When you notice stuff, you really can see it quickly. So reality TV, and I've never really talked about that a lot, but reality TV is a great example of people who are one or the other. All these people crying in a wreck.
Oh god, it's awful.
Oh.
That's when I changed channel. I'm like, okay, way too much emotion.
Yeah.
I can't handle.
And it doesn't make these people bad people or people incapable of love. It doesn't make them bad people. It just means that their frame for it is not in a secure manner. And another, it's not secure. And another thing about it so you have to understand that. I mean, that's the biggest thing. And I know what I was going to say. Another thing about it too is just because if you have an insecure attachment, if you're anxious avoidant type, that doesn't mean that's who you are as a person. People misinterpret that. Your attachment is literally how you attach in romantic relationships. So someone's like, oh, I'm anxious. Am I an anxious person? You might not be an anxious person.
Right, I see. But you're anxious when it comes to an intimate. Right.
So you could be a person with not necessarily an anxious person at all.
That's interesting, actually.
It's a piece of your character.
Yeah, my ex was definitely concerned of intimacy.
Yeah.
But that would be like, wait, and we were together for 4 years, and I'm like, so were we, and it wasn't that I was asking for marriage or anything, it was more like taking the next step of like, can I meet your family? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or, at some point I wanted to move in together, and it just was like, I knew it was never, he was completely scared of it. You know, and he wouldn't say it, because what guy says that they're scared of anything, right?
Yeah.
But it was more like, no, blah. I'm like, okay, I can't with this. You know what I mean? It just was like...
Let me tell you, it doesn't feel like scared to us, even though that's what it is underneath. It feels like annoyance, to avoidance. And I can speak this, like it literally feels like annoyance. It feels like...
Like the other person's pushing more, and you're like, I don't want that.
Yes, you feel like, oh.
Yeah, that's how he was. I'm so happy you're my pseudo brother that we don't date.
I know. We're like step brother and sister.
Yes.
Yes. I'm that way. And
how awful, Geoff. Jesus.
And it's I know. I mean it's but people have to understand that it doesn't mean I'm an avoidant person, and the anxious type doesn't mean they're an anxious person. Right. It's just how they attach to people. That really has to be, in physics, when I was a kid, like learning in class, people would confuse like acceleration with speed, or like different types of it. Yeah. It's so easy to confuse, when you say your attachment type, to think that is they don't understand the discrepancy. That is just how you attach. Like, that's it.
Right. It's not like who
it doesn't
you are.
define you.
Yeah,
right. So that's an important piece to remember.
Do you talk to are you able to, let's say you're with someone and you realize that, okay, this person's, an anxious or whatever, and it's not matching together. Mm-hmm. Is that person able to adapt and change into more of a secure?
Yes.
Okay, so it's not like, well, that's what you are, and you're stuck now.
In fact, you don't really. First, you have to have awareness, and most people don't.
So, because you're aware that intimacy is something that is
I struggle with, yeah.
Right.
Anyway.
So that's something that you could continue to work on and try and build if you wanted to. If you
Absolutely.
want to take steps. Oh, okay.
And I need someone who most people don't have the levels of awareness to know that, to even know about attachment, 1, and to 2, know what attachment they are, and 3, to want to be willing to work on it.
Right.
With their partner.
Yeah.
Because it's too hard. It's too much. They can't.
Oh, it's cerebral. I mean, it's a lot of it can be mind numbing after a while. You're like, oh my dear God. But I understand it, because if you really are wanting a relationship to work and you're working on it together, you know what I mean? Then you want to be aware of everything that's around, and how each person's approaching the relationship at that point.
Yeah. And you have to be open and willing to do that, and most people aren't. I mean, most people, especially ironically, the avoidant types. Like how I am is very like rare.
That you're like, I want to work on this.
Yes.
And
yeah. Because you would think the avoidant especially doesn't want anything to do with any of that.
No.
We hate, but I'm just different in that way, that I can feel what these types feel, what these guys who are like pushing away, or women do it, it's gender,
for sure.
gender, but I feel what those feelings are. Like
I have a girlfriend of mine that has, and it's so funny, it just came up just now.
Yeah.
From a female perspective, she's like that. She hasn't really had a long-term relationship, and each one kind of lasts a few months. But the minute it's the guy's like really starting to get, interesting and more intimate, she's now no longer interested, and it goes to someone else.
That's right. That's what they do.
That's crazy.
Right. So
there's a lot of people like that.
Yeah. And they use different tools. Some people will use...
Like, could you call that like a serial dater?
Yeah. That's what it is.
That's what it is, right?
This is a mind prison that we've labeled for years and years in a certain way, and we're now finally with attachment theory starting to have the awareness of what's really going on. It was always labeled for decades before attachment, which is the last 15 years. It was labeled for decades as just like push-pull, games.
Right.
No, you have to both realize you're this way, and if you care enough, you have to get together and you have to work on it together, and stop playing games through text, stop playing games through email, stop breaking up with each other through text, breaking up with each other through email. Right. You have to face the person and really get into wanting to work on it.
Yeah.
And avoidance are the hardest to get to that awareness.
It's so interesting. My ex was definitely in the avoidance where I was like, and I wasn't pushing. I was always very respectful of like, okay, we'll give time, but it was never going to reach that other level, And I'm like, but I want to be in a very intimate relationship. Like, I would like you to read the 5 Love Languages book. And that was just way much. You know what I mean? So I'm like, no, I want to make sure that we're like connecting languages and love language. You know what I mean? Our communication is there, and that I'm giving you what you need and all that. And he was like, no.
Yeah.
I'm like,
of course.
What? Why don't you want to work on the relationship? I don't understand that.
And
I mean, it's good that you're able to recognize it. Like, I know this is me. I'm trying to work on it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
if you're a secure attachment type, I don't know what your attachment type is. That's natural. Now, here's the trick: the anxious type thinks that they want that. Like, they think, but they really don't want it either.
Right. Because the minute they get it, then they're like, oh wait, never mind. I don't.
They don't want it either. They just think that they do.
Right.
Like, they aren't comfortable. They aren't comfortable with it. They just think that they are. But each is using a different strategy. The anxious is using in their head the strategy. How do I get her? How do I get him?
Right.
They're panicking.
Yeah, it's the game.
They're panicking.
Yeah.
And the avoidant is using go away. But they're both avoiding the same thing. There's a brilliant psychologist, MFT, who online she does videos, and she says it's not actually opposites, but it's like sees like. Her name's Brianna McWilliam, I think is her name. But she says it's like sees like, and that's why they go, because they're actually both have the same problem. It's both avoiding,
but they're just
using a different tool.
That's nuts.
Yeah, they're using a different tool. So you have to get to the awareness of this, guys. Whoever's listening out there, like, you really have to, and don't be so hard on you if you are an insecure attachment type, because it literally is every other person or more. But the great movie characters, like we were saying, are the insecure types. If you look at The Great Gatsby, he's an anxious type. If you watch Leo in that movie, he's like, if I can just get Daisy,
right.
Daisy Buchanan. And guess what she is? She's avoidant.
Right.
She goes off and marries that guy, and Gatsby's a mess. And so Leo, go watch clips of Leonardo DiCaprio in The Great Gatsby, and you're watching an anxious type at work. If you want to see an avoidant, go watch Jerry Maguire, who is ultimately.
He's like the epitome of it.
Correct.
Oh, interesting. And the secure ones are never shown on screen because it's boring because there's two.
Couple secure, correct. The insecures make for the good TV,
right.
like reality TV. But a secure would be Renee Zellweger in Jerry Maguire. She was very comfortable with expressing her feelings to him. She stayed on Jerry, as was Rod Tidwell was secure when he would give Jerry advice. Rod was insecure on other things in his life, his career, his money, but Rod's relationship, Rod Tidwell, he was very secure in his love life. That was kind of a big plot of the movie. But that would be one. There's a movie, I have not seen this movie, but I saw clips of it called The Notebook with Ryan Gosling. And his character in that, I saw a clip of, is secure in that. I've just seen a couple clips, honestly.
I haven't seen it either.
So there are a few, but yes, the movie characters are great. 500 Days of Summer. Go watch 500 Days of Summer. It's an anxious and avoidant at play. He's anxious and she's avoidant, and there's literally plays out over the course of the movie.
It's interesting though, because like even looking back at my previous relationships, I could see myself like, okay, if I, I would be both sometimes. Like I like one relationship I'd be avoidant, one I would be anxious, and then now I'm like, I'm totally fine. I finally was able to get to like the secure side where I'm like, you know what, I'm fine either way, and I'm not gonna push or shove, and we can cut all the bullshit out and all the games and just get down to like brass tacks. You know what I mean?
Because that's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Being able to work with your partner on that, and you will find outside of the secure types, the insecure types, most of the time don't want to. They even if they're aware or semi-aware, it's very hard, and that's why they recommend that anxious and avoidance find secure partners, because it balances them. But it doesn't mean that anxious and avoidance can't work it out. They both have to want to. But the irony is anxious and avoidance always find each other. They always go for each other because they both validate their view of the world. Right. They both, how they see the world, it validates their view of the world. The avoidant believes their partner should be constantly on them, even though they're annoyed by it. Right. It's a paradox. While the anxious believes that they want more from their partner, but their partner constantly avoids them. So both the frame gives them, their childhood and genetics has given them a frame for how they behave, and they validate each other in that way. It's very paradoxical.
That's actually really kind of cool. I mean, I feel like we could talk about, I feel like we could do a podcast just on relationships. And I know there are, but I mean like just going through each and dissecting it, so then like future relationships will be set up a little bit in a more positive way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not many people like step back and think about what they've learned from their past relationship, pause for a bit, and then maybe they go into another relationship. A lot of people like bounce right into another. Yeah. And they haven't really processed what happened in the past. Do you know what I mean? So it's almost like you have to take that time to focus on you, learn more about yourself, and then you can take that and enjoy another person,
It's the only way to grow.
Yeah.
It's the only way to, you have to do that.
Yeah.
And not enough people do. And, and one thing I will say just about this too is be very aware that it is a spectrum, and it's very easy to get caught up in these labels and such, and people do move around in the spectrum. Any insecure type can become secure through some work, or it takes a lot of work on yourself and awareness. People can move around and try not to pathologize things too much. It's just giving you a framework. Like that's the biggest thing to know. And one thing that happens to me, and that it happens with all avoidance, and you can see this play out time and time again, is the avoidant type, male or female, will dodge the anxious type. And then what happens often is the anxious will then pull away or get tired of it or pack their bags and say, I'm out. Mm-hmm. And when that happens, the avoidant often will like vomit up all of those feelings that they have been like suppressing, and then they will start pursuing the anxious to try to get them back to the pattern that they were in before.
Late. Sorry, too late.
And by then the anxious is like, yeah, sorry, too late. Yep. But then sometimes they do come back, and it creates this cycle of the pattern. Well, the only way to break that pattern is the two wanting to work on it together, and the awareness of wanting to work on it together. And often both sides don't want to have the awareness or don't want to work on it together. And that's the only way to get through it. But you'll see that in relationship after relationship, because if you're avoidant type, you'll be like, I do dodge, but then sometimes I really I do feel like I'm anxious sometimes.
Right.
And that's often because both have the same problem. You're just handling it with a different set of tools, okay? Both sides are the same thing. So know that about attachment.
I love this topic. I think it's great.
We can do some others on it. Maybe
Yeah,
at some point
good.
we can have a guest who
Oh yeah,
knows,
speaking of guests, we have a really awesome guest next week. I'm so stoked. He was gonna come this week, but his flight to Miami got screwed up. But
let's hear about him. What?
yeah, he's really a really interesting guy. Interestingly enough, I met him at a club that I go to on Tuesdays called Cloak and Dagger, and he was always like a really cool kind of guy, but he was kind of like an asshole. I'm like, I respect you, I think you're like cool, but at the same time you're like kind of obnoxious. And then he went on this trip, and he went through something down there that was so incredible that it was absolutely life-changing. And I actually didn't even know he was down in Mexico or whatever doing, on a trip. When he came back, it was like, wait, who is this person? I didn't even recognize him. It was a radical shift. And it's a whole new life philosophy for him. And he was able to grow from who he was and to who he is now, and then be able to give back to everyone else who needs it. It's just mind-blowing. I'm not gonna even say his name or who anything, because I want him to really talk about his story and the life change that he did, and now that he's gonna try and give back. Because ultimately, like we talked about it in our first podcast, is we want to bring on guests that are trying to shape and change the world in some unique way. Mm-hmm. And he went from being a very selfish, into his own money, all of that, into now, I just want to give back to everyone.
It's great.
And it's so incredible. I'm so excited to have him. So that'll be 2 weeks from now, because next week's Thanksgiving, and then our Friendsgiving, depending on where you're at with Thanksgiving. But yeah, 2 weeks from now, it's going to be great. Stay tuned.
We'll be back with him in a couple weeks.
Yes.
And we're very excited about him, as she said. And this is episode 2, Attachment Theory. Next week or 2 weeks from now, we'll have our first guest. Yes. And we're just getting going.
Yes, I'm so excited.
Coming out of the station here on this launch radio. I mean, the fun times are ahead, for sure. So thank you, everyone, for listening in. I'm Geoff, and
I'm Kira.
And to be continued. We will see you in a couple weeks.
Bye.
Bye.